All right. Hi, guys. So I'm just going to do a quick little run through of sort of how to break down the homework um, for today, just to give you some help because this is all the naming sort of all smashed together. So, uh, so compound. All right. So for our naming, we have learned essentially four categories, I guess you could say, of different styles of naming. There's the two sort of overall um, big ones, which are ionic ionic bonds and covalent. Okay, and then we also have a couple of more like specialized, I guess you could say, categories of um, acids and hydrates. Okay, so when they are all together, how can you identify um, how can you identify which type of naming you're going to do for that one? Which category it falls into is the first thing you have to figure out. You have to figure out is that molecule, that compound, sorry, is that compound, is that ionic, covalent, an acid, or a hydrate? Okay, so covalent, remember, we're also calling binary molecular. Okay, so how can we tell the difference? Well, some of these are easy. For example, the acid begins with hydrogen, except for water, obviously. But for what we're doing now, are there other compounds that begin with hydrogen that aren't acids? Yeah, for sure. But for what we're doing, any compound I give you that begins with H, that's not water, will be an acid. Okay. So if it begins with hydrogen, it's going to be an acid. The hydrates are also pretty easy to identify. These will end with a dot, a number, and then H2O. They'll have that at the end of the formula. Okay, so those two are pretty easy. Ionic and covalent. Okay. The difference between these two is ionic will begin with a metal or the NH4 ammonia um, or with ammonia, the positive polyatomic. Hydronium is also a positive polyatomic, but I'm not going to use any of those because, uh, as I trying to find it here, as I just mentioned, um, I want anything that starts with a hydrogen. I want you guys to be thinking acids. So, trying to find a polyatomic chart here. Um, so I'm not even in the stuff that I give you. I'm not going to even use hydronium because I don't want you thinking ionic. I want you thinking an acid with that. So The only positive polyatomic that we'll have is the NH4 plus 1. That's ionic, or if it begins with a metal. Okay, now, how do you know if it's a metal? Well, I have, there's a wall in my room, or, hold on, let me pause real quick. Okay, I have this periodic table, which I'm going to post on Google Classroom, that is that's colored as well with labeled metals, metalloids, semimetals, and nonmetals. So you can tell from that as well. Okay? Or you can even just look it up if you're unsure on Google or something. All right. So begins with a metal or NH4 plus 1. It's going to be ionic. So then covalent is essentially going to be everything else, which is going to be two. We're only doing the binary molecular, meaning there's only two elements, two things that are not metals, which means they could be semi-metals, they could be non-metals. Right? This is how you tell the difference between the four. Okay. Now, what I would recommend you do for the homework is when you have them all all the different types smashed together like this, one of the biggest reasons that people get them wrong is not because they don't know how to do the different naming styles. It's because they accidentally get confused. Either they get on a roll and they're doing them and then they forget to change the naming style, or they get them like flip-flopped or something and they start doing a certain type of naming on a category that it shouldn't be done. So what I would recommend, at least at the beginning until you get good at it, and maybe just do it anytime they're all kind of jumbled like this, is before you start naming them, go down the side and figure out the category that each of these falls in. Okay, so like label them basically. So I'm going to do my acids first on the homework. So I'm going to find the acids, anything that begins with an H. So I'm just literally scanning down here. Anything that begins with an H, I'm going to put an A by so I know it's an acid. Okay, and I go down and I find all of them. Okay. So once I've identified all the acids, I'm going to go to another category. I'm going to go to hydrates. Those are easy too. They end with dot number H2O, right? So find all my hydrates, and I'm going to put an H next to those. All right. Now I'm down to two categories, ionic and covalent. I'm going to find all of my ionic, the ones that begin with a metal, okay? And I'm going to label those ionic. Okay, and then if it doesn't begin with a metal, you could label it covalent if you wanted. You could go back and do those. But okay, magnesium, that's a metal, ionic. Copper, metal, ionic. Aluminum, metal, ionic. Lead, metal, ionic. Boron is a semi-metal, so that's going to be covalent. Barium is a metal, ionic. Lead, a metal, ionic. Okay, and so on. Nitrogen, not non-metal, so covalent. Potassium, metal, ionic. So, and I would just do this all the way down. Once you get them all labeled, when you go to do the worksheet, what I would do is I would do all of one type at a time. Like I would do all the acids first. Then I would do all the covalents, or I do all the hydrates. Then I would do all the covalents. Then I would do all the ionic. That way you're not like switching back and forth between styles. Now, if you know what you're doing and you can do that easily, that's fine. But it just kind of helps keep everything organized and straight, and that way you don't get naming styles sort of scrambled or mixed up. Okay. All right. That's it. If you guys have any questions, let me know. Good luck.